Hi everyone, what's up? Today I'm going to talk about Cuba and the effect that the media has and everything that has been going on. I'm Cuban. I was born in Cuba. I came into the US legally when I was 4 years old. My family is still in Cuba. My dad is still in Cuba. So obviously everything that's going on really does hit close to home. It really does kind of take a toll on me emotionally, mentally, like physically. Like it just kind of everything that I've been thinking of for the past couple of days. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that's all I've been posting about. It's all any Cuban who has family on the islands, and even some who don't, have been posting about, and just trying to figure out like what we can do. So I decided that I would talk about that, and not just to talk about it because I know some of you aren't as involved with Cuba or politics, but I wanted to talk about the role that media and social media and media has in all of this, and perhaps what it's like to, what I can imagine it's like to be working on like the government end of this, or like the press. So I'm going to talk about all of that, but obviously it would make sense to sort of brief you a little bit as to what's going on in Cuba. It's going to be a little bit difficult to explain this because it's just years and years of history, and it's very complicated. It's not black and white. But the first thing that I'm going to start with the Patria IVida movement, which is fatherland and life movement. When Fidel took over Cuba, his slogan was Patria o Muerte, which means fatherland or death, which means you stand by your fatherland, you stand by the land where you were born, you stand by the revolution, or death. So the rewording of this phrase first started by an artist in Cuba on the island, and he was part of Movimiento San Isidro, which was a movement on the island. I'm not sure when it took place, but I would say about less than a year ago. It was a movement on the island that sort of gained more popularity recently in the past couple of months. And the person who started Patria IVida, which is fatherland and life, was an artist. He's still an artist. He was detained in Cuba because in Cuba, you're not allowed to say any of that. You're not allowed to speak against the fatherland. You're not allowed to criticize it. You're not allowed to do anything, even if it's peaceful. So it's nothing like the U.S. where you have freedom of speech and you can say whatever you want. In Cuba, you're arrested, you're detained. Sometimes you're even shot. You die because you spoke something bad about Fidel or the revolution, or And even now, my mom is still like worried about the things that I say on the internet because she doesn't want me not to be allowed into the country again. So that is how ingrained the values and the revolution is within us Cubans, even those that live outside of the island, which is a whole other topic, and it's very nuanced, so I won't get into that. But basically that is how the Patria IVida movement started. Then Cuban artists, some of them who lived here, picked up on that movement and they created a song. And so the song is all about reimagining a new Cuba, reimagining a free Cuba. And I'll list it here on the screen. I think for Cubans, seeing that this artist had spoken out and had reached a lot of people, that made them lose a little bit of their fear to speak and to do things for their country. Remember, it's 60-something years, 62 years of revolutionary talk and of people, of like the government instilling fear in them. So it's a little difficult to comprehend when you don't live there and when you don't come from that, like the fear that is that lives with Cubans. If they say anything, if they speak out, if they do anything that can get them killed or arrested. I think that artist, the song, and in addition to COVID and the lack of resources that they have been experiencing because of COVID, as well as the conditions in the hospitals, the lack of food. Like I would call my cousin and every time she'd be like, this is getting worse and worse. Like I don't see how it can get better. Like they haven't been able to see a way out. All of that was sort of like a catalyst for the protest that happened this weekend on Sunday. I know there have been some mixed messages because there's some people saying, oh, it's because of COVID, that's why they're going on the streets, and some people saying it's freedom. I think it is ultimately freedom, but COVID also had like a huge role to play in that because they were just kind of fed up. Like the Cuban people are fed up with everything. Like they just cannot take it any longer. And that's why they took to the streets, or something that they have never done before post-revolution. The civil unrest in Cuba was so much that the government didn't know how to contain it. You saw how they had to bring in troops to Cuba from Venezuela. You saw how the citizens were fighting with the police, like all of that stuff. Like I'm sure you've seen the videos. So it was so, sorry, I have my notes here. And it was so much that what they did was block the internet, right? That was the first thing that they did, block the internet so that people outside couldn't couldn't see what was happening in Cuba, and so that they can like sort of calm the population, right? Because that is how it is in those countries. So what is like the first thing that you want to control is access to the internet, access to social media. So they removed all of that. So I wasn't able to get in contact with my family for about 2 days. Now they're allowing more internet use. So I think the most important thing right now that people are actually asking for is to let Cubans have internet use. So in case that, you know, there's protests in another side of the country that we're not seeing, they can film it and send and tag people in the US, and like, you know, and we'll repost it. And so all of that helps because it helps people see the real Cuba, and people see what's going on in Cuba. Now, the Biden administration's response to what's going on in Cuba has been nothing short of underwhelming. I don't know where that's going to go, but from a sort of a media perspective, when that does happen, I can imagine that his team has to sort of figure out a way to say something that's sympathizing with people, but that's also like not really going to make a difference. Spinning it in that way where it's like, oh, we're not really going to do anything for you, but we're going to make it seem like we're with you to just calm the people down a little bit, calm the Cubans in Florida down. That is just a very kind of PR way to spin things. And I guess you guys could learn from that, because, you know, at some point, I mean, it feels a little bit weird to like make this comparison because we're talking about Cuba, but at some point you're going to have to kind of be very politically correct. Especially if you're working for like government PR, or if there has been an argument or something like that, you want to say something but you can't because you have a lot of eyes on you. I think what President Biden's response was very politically correct, but it really didn't do much. It didn't say anything. Someone who has been very outspoken about what's going on in Cuba is Rubio, who did take the time to draft a speech, which was probably drafted by his team and alongside with him, and talk about what is happening in Cuba, what is happening with dictatorship, what is happening in Venezuela, and kind of, you know, talk about all of that. I'll leave the link below to his speech. Obviously, they have people working endlessly and researching and making sure that all the facts are correct before they go on camera. I would hope so. Sometimes they really don't. Sometimes, you know, the people behind this just don't understand what to say. I wouldn't say that, you know, Biden's response wasn't favorable. It's not something that I would have, you know, it's not something that I accept as a Cuban, but it's for that somebody who works in PR and understands like the way that PR and governments work. It was an effective response to kind of calm down people, even though no one's calm, but you get what I mean. I'm trying to like switch to my PR brain right now, but it's hard because I'm just so like affected by everything in Cuba. Also, to add on to that, all of those responses require a press release, which requires somebody to write it. It's probably somebody in their communications department, their PR department, to write the press release, to make sure it's accurate, to make sure it gets approved by the right hands, to, you know, do all of that end work, or like that back work. Is it back work? Do all of that like grunt work of like communications and PR, which is, you know, the writing, the researching, and all of that. So if you are going to work in government PR, if that's something that interests you, just be prepared to, you know, it's kind of crazy because in PR, my former boss used to say, it's okay, we're not saving lives. But if it's like government PR and stuff like that, like you really can't risk kind of being inaccurate when you first send out a press release, because then all of the media is going to receive it, and then they're going to post inaccurate information to the masses. And then that is like, once you have to kind of correct or go back and say something different, it happens all the time, but it's like it really discredits you and your work. So you don't want to ever like do that. You don't even want to do that when you're kind of working with clients. But if I'm working with a beauty client and I make a mistake in something that I said, I can just correct it really quick. But if it's the government, it's like a whole different ballgame. Another function of PR when you're working within the government, and I'm sad to say this is kind of like the area where I just feel like everything is like fake, and literally people are just working for their own best interest and their own political parties and whatever serves them best. But if a Republican is saying something, they'll choose to focus more on different talking points versus Democrats, depending on what it is that they want, depending on their future or their now interests, right? It's all really deflating, like the way that the media positions everything. And that's what sometimes like I just get kind of deflated is the only word that I could use for how when I read the media and things, when I read what the media is publishing in times like these, and how they angle things to fit their specific interest and not so much like what is actually happening, and they're not as biased as they should be as like people reporting as reporters. It breaks my heart, because the function of reporting is to tell the story as it is and not go either side. And that's honestly what has become like increasingly frustrating in this country, is that, you know, Fox will always talk about, you know, Republicans, and then other publications will talk about Democrats, and like, and they're trying to always kind of fulfill or like work for an agenda, and their news outlets. So it's all pretty fucked up, I would say. And it's disappointing, and it's like the disappointing part of PR. Like once you're in it, you're just like, oh, this is also a part of it, and this sucks, and it sucks that I have to kind of come in and do this. So yeah, on that note, and to end, because I don't really know what I've been saying, I've just kind of been like talking about my emotions to you guys, but also trying to relate it back to like PR and media. Obviously some of these things are not the funnest things to think about, or like the most entertaining when it comes to PR. I think it's also important for us as consumers of the media and what they're saying to do our homework, and to be just really diligent about even looking at the documents, which is something that I heard on my friend's podcast. He had a guest who said, look at the actual documents that the writers are talking about, and kind of see what you can gather from it yourself, and see, you know, what it's all about, because an article can only tell you so much. So if you actually look at the actual petition or documents, and if you read it through, you're going to be so much better informed about whatever kind of case it is. It sucks that we've come to like this point where we can't like really trust the media as much as we used to. And obviously because of social media is so powerful in that, like, you know, it's obviously such a tool for international communities, and it's so powerful because the reason why all of this happened with Cuba is because it was being circulated, and now everyone is just aware of what's happening. Everything on social media moves so much more quickly than anybody could ever write about it, but there's also videos that are false, there's also photos that are false, videos that are old, positioning that is not true. So you need to be really careful, and it's really sad that you can't trust a lot of what is being said in the media, in terms of like when these things happen, and then you have to really do your own research, talk to people, and see what's actually going on. So I'd say just make sure that the info you're consuming in the media is accurate. Make sure that you can look into it as much as you can. I will try to do my part to make sure that everything that I share on my social media and on my platforms are also as accurate as they can be at the time, and that I've looked it up, that I've researched it, that I know, you know, that I know as much as I know that I can share with you guys. I hope this video helped you in some way. I know that I'm a little bit on like the lower end of the energy scale, but I just can't. I really wanted to post a video for you guys, but I'm also feeling the way I'm feeling, and I'm also human, and these things also affect my life. So yeah, try to do the best you can for Cuba and for any other country that asks for help. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here next time.